to our viewers in Trinidad and Tobago and wherever you are watching us here on WESN. Welcome to the program. This is AM Prime. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for being with us and thanks for staying with us. Let's tell you what's going to happen in this edition of the program. We are talking in the second hour with Dr. Ashney Singh. He's a senior minister in the Office of the President in the Republic of Guyana. We're talking about their moves to continue to push ahead with exploration and production and delivery of oil and gas, where they are, how they're moving ahead, what's the message at this point in the game for them. We're also talking with Mr. Travis Chico. That's going to be our first discussion. He is the president of an organization called the Caribbean Federation of Police Welfare Associations, and they are promoting the idea of tougher penalties for attacks on police officers. Well, what do we make of that in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the region? Also, in this edition of the program, we're talking with Mr. Booker Rennie. He was one of 10 Trinidad and Tobago students who were sent back to the country, who were paid, their passages were paid to come back by the then Prime Minister, the late Dr. Eric Williams, because they had been involved in some protests at the university then called Sir George Williams University in Montreal, Canada. It was a disturbance that took place there in a computer room for some reasons that we will get to when we get to him. But the issue is that incident which caused the suspension and the deportation of those students led to what some people are saying is the idea behind the formation of the organization called the National Joint Action Committee, because soon after that incident, the then governor of Canada, so Roland Michener, was paying a visit to Trinidad, and students at the university, the St. Augustine campus, refused to allow him entry onto the premises of the campus, and that was a big issue. That was 1969, and it led into what we went through in 1970. And so that's the story that out of that grew activism and consciousness in the people of Trinidad and Tobago, leading to the formation of that organization, which is known today as NJAC. So what was that like? And Mr. Rennie is one of the few surviving members of that team who was sent back, that team of students who was sent back at that time. And so years after that, what's the situation? How is he describing it, given the fact that the university now has apologized for how it handled the situation then in 1969? To what extent the apology is, well, accepted, to what extent it meets what some people had said that from the beginning that something had been wrong with that. So those are the issues we're talking about this morning. I think Mr. Chivo is Mr. Chico, we get that right, the pronunciation of his name, Travis Chico. He's the president of the Caribbean Federation of Police Welfare Associations, and they are pushing a move for tougher penalties for criminals who attack police officers. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And indeed, we would have released our position as it pertains to the levels of criminality that have been faced by police officers of late. And we want to say straight that any person who makes the decision to attack a police officer or to consider harming a police officer should know that there will be consequences with their actions. And hence the Caribbean Federation of Police Welfare Association, which is the parent body for every welfare association within the Caribbean, advocates that anyone who goes before a court for causing harm to a police officer, for taking the life of a police officer, or even the attempt to take the life of a police officer, should be dealt with in a manner that signals a zero tolerance for the agents of the state.
So is this a phenomenon that is happening in parts of the Caribbean?
We are not surprised, as we understand the dynamics with borders in the region being very porous. We understand the high influx of ghost guns and other firearms being in the hands of criminals. And it's one thing to put illegal arms in the hands of criminals. We understand that sometimes in many countries, the only apparatus which has the responsibility for protecting national security, we understand that we will be at the ends of the barrel. And hence, before this press release on stiffer penalties, we would have advocated for a number of things to be done in order to ensure proper protection of law enforcement officers. We've asked for the body cameras. We've asked for better protective equipment. We've asked for retooling and better training of police officers so that we can stun the challenges which are presently at our doors. And we must come to the realization that the policing strategies of 1960 and 1930, the legislation which governed police forces 100-something years ago, is almost inadequate now, and we cannot continue to operate under those archaic laws and systems. And we are at the crossroads where it is very important for us as a law enforcement body or law enforcement bodies around the region to advocate for change, to advocate for so many areas that we need, so many scientific researches in terms of that has been conducted that signifies the need for change within law enforcement, especially within third world and developing countries. So we are not surprised. We understand the challenges because we know that firearms are indeed are easily available, and hence we understand as the executors of the law in terms of ensuring that there is peace and safety. We understand that the barrels will be turned at us.
So what are some of the things you're talking about, the laws and the regulations governing the performance of police officers across the region that have become archaic?
Okay, so definitely when you look at certain legislation, so for me, for example, myself with St. Lucian, we look at that we've not had laws which governs the use of non-lethal means of apprehending and taking down criminals. We look at the way things are being done in terms of how we get police officers to operate in this new era, rather than some of the laws which govern when the act was written in 1960 or last reviewed in way back. So when we look at those laws compared to the new shifts and the new technologies, we need to see the laws reflect the new technologies, the new means of providing a 21st century policing to our people. We see again the colonial approaches to policing in terms of we are so held on to what has been handed down to us that we've not created an identity for ourselves as a regional police body. And we're saying that we need to review those laws. We need to review those systems. We need to review how we do things in terms of the constant writing of tickets and writing. We need to go into an era where we depend less on the physical body being present at stations, rather than creating a more automated system and cause for the human resource to be more visible, more present, because we know that the science of boots on the road has been one of the better sciences in terms of crime reduction and being able to detect and seize illegal weapons and also narcotics on the streets. So we're asking for a review. We're not saying that we're gonna abolish everything or scrap everything. There are things that are still able to work in this time, but we need to ensure that it is working and it is reflective of the new trends of society.
You talk about the colonial legacy. You think that will include the fact that in St. Lucia, the police service is still referred to as the Royal St. Lucia Police Force?
Indeed, but whilst this may be where we are, we have a serious challenge on our hand that whilst we focus on legislative changes, we see the attacks on our policemen are very, 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 very. It's at a heightened stage, more or less. We've lost in countries, especially where we've not lost police officers to serious crimes and violence. We see in St. Lucia, it is happening. We see in Turks and Caicos. We see in the Bahamas. We see in so many other countries, in Jamaica, Trinidad, who before you would have only probably heard, well, Jamaica, Trinidad would have the two main ones, but we see now the infiltration in the smaller islands like Turks and Caicos, the BVI, and those countries. We see that criminals have infiltrated these countries and are turning against law enforcement officers, and this is indeed frightening, and hence we are calling on the necessary or the relevant authorities to stand their ground to ensure that a policeman who wakes up in the morning and leaves his kids, his wife, and their families, to go out and provide a service should not be a victim of not knowing whether he comes back home or not because of rascality in countries. So we are saying that every criminal who decides that he is going to break the law, especially turning the weapon on the men and women we represent within the region, should understand that there is dire consequences for his actions. And we believe that once you have attempted to or taken the life of a police officer and you are found guilty, that the death penalty should be served upon you.
All right, you mentioned two societies. They are part of the Caribbean, of our legacy, and in the Caribbean space, but they are among the groups of islands who are not formally members of this integration movement called CARICOM, the Turks and Caicos and
the British Virgin Islands.
The Virgin Islands and so on. What is the sense that so they are members of this organization, the police?
Indeed, we span 16 territories at this point, with 14 affiliates and 2 observer members. The Caribbean Federation is a movement that represents the interests of police officers within the Caribbean. So we know that we have members who are not part of CARICOM, but yet still are part of the Caribbean Federation. So
yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Our span is way beyond CARICOM. We are interested in protecting and representing and advocating on the interests of police officers. So we span from Bermuda, TCI, BVI. Once members understand the vision, and the vision is plain. The vision is for us to represent the interests of police welfare organizations around the Caribbean to ensure that we can advocate for change and advocate great and proper representation for our men and women who wear blue.
Because is it the considered opinion of yourselves that the punishment and the penalties for attacks on police officers is not what it should be?
Definitely, we've seen persons shot at police officers and persons injuring police officers, and we've seen a slap on the wrist. We've seen persons are threatening police officers to take action. Persons are sending voice notes calling on the friends to open fire, drive by on police officers, and we see when those things come to fruition, we see sentences of basically a tap on the wrist being handed down, and hence we're saying, based on our observation, based on the reports coming back to the parent body, we are not satisfied. We are not happy with some of the verdicts or some of the sentences being given to those criminals who believe that they can wake up in the morning and with no conscience attack police officers and believe that they can walk free or receive a tap a spanking on the butt and believe that it can be and it can happen again. We believe that a strong message must be sent every time. A very powerful message must be sent by the judiciary every time that when agents of the state are attacked, the state is attacked. And because of that, we believe that the consequences must be severe, that it serves as a form of a deterrent.
So short of a killing, you're talking about short of a killing where in most of our countries and territories, the penalty is the facing of the death penalty. Short of that, you're saying that prison sentences and charges and so on are too minimal.
Indeed, they are.
So the Trinidad and Tobago Police Social and Welfare Association is a member of this organization?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. And so you're talking to people in Trinidad and Tobago to sort of in support of action that you want to that the Trinidad and Tobago Organization and Association is part of this advocacy, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, they are part of the advocacy.
What are some of the you say you talk about slaps on the wrist and so on? What are some of the penalties that are now being imposed on people who take that kind of action against police officers?
Well, and as I said, the sentences differ in jurisdiction, and we have received report where persons have been sentenced 3 years for shooting at police officers. Persons have been sentenced 2 years for shooting at police officers. Persons have been sentenced 1 month for threatening police officers. Persons have been, and we're saying that this is not enough. That if you believe that you could walk to a police officer, burn his car or her car, come to her house or his house and leave death threats because of the execution of their duties, we believe that it must be serious. There must be mandatory prison sentences for persons who believe that they can attack the police, be it for threats, be it for causing harm, using a firearm, be it for attempted murder, be it for whatever it is. We believe that it must be a mandatory sentence, and there must be consistency within the Caribbean. There must be consistency within jurisdictions that we will send a very strong message, because the issue of crime does not affect only Trinidad. The issue of crime does not affect only Montserrat. The issues of crime does not affect only St. Lucia. The issue of crime affects the entire region. The issue of crime affects major economies within the region, and hence we believe that the strong statement, a strong message must be sent. Deterrence must be within the minds of our legislators and those who are responsible for handing down sentences. Hence, we believe that this is the course of action that should be taken.
So this is part of a general sort of lobbying initiative, and does it follow, or will this be to come, that you all will directly be in touch with and petition countries in the region? And this is the start of it, or where you along?
Well, definitely we have begun commence the writing, because you know one thing, it's good to be good orators, but we are very swift to preparing documents and sending out documents. We have written to CARICOM, we have written to the associations of police commissioners. We are in the process of writing to other stakeholders, governments, and also we we understand that we are not going to prejudice any matter before the court. But however, we believe that where it matters most, where we are able to advocate, which is within our parliaments around the region, and also at the CARICOM level, we have written and we are waiting responses, and we believe as a legitimate body, we should be given an opportunity to speak as an authority on matters of policing. We believe that we should be given a listening ear as we make our contributions around the Caribbean, which is in all, for all intents and purposes, we are not malicious, we are not pushing any agenda, but the only agenda, and the agenda is absolutely clear, that we want to see proper representation. We want to ensure that the longevity of policing within the Caribbean is maintained. And we do not want to see, or we do not want to get to the point where generations to come are afraid to serve in one of the noblest occupations in the Caribbean, which is policing. We do not want to get to a point where we have to see foreigners coming to lead or work within our police forces. Rather, we want to ensure that our policymakers set the right framework to ensure the longevity and to ensure that there is no brain drain within the police services in the Caribbean.
All right, Travis Chico, President of the Caribbean Federation of Police Welfare Associations, calling for tougher penalties against people across the region who take action, criminal action against police officers. Thank you very much for talking with us.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we begin our look around the region. We'll tell you some of where we will go. We will stop in Jamaica, at least for the time being, as we continue on the program. Up next as a guest after that, Bukareni, a labor historian and a member of that group that we call the Trinidad 10. 10 Trinidad and Tobago students were involved in these disturbances at the then Sir George Williams University in Montreal, Canada in 1969. They were all sent back. The government of Trinidad and Tobago at the time had to pay their way back. And the university has changed its name many years ago, but it has just issued an apology for the way in which the administration there dealt with the situation that led to the riot by the students. We're talking with him about that. A look back at a moment in time. Stay with us.
Chancatoues El Socorro and Boundary Road, San Juan, and now open the retail warehouse compound, Rushford Street in San Fernando.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Scrub City, your #1 choice for medical uniforms, medical accessories, and footwear. Scrub City, 2 locations, San Fernando and Chaguanas, or check our Facebook page.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white, and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered,
the conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
That's all the big son. Bungie remember them days? Well, all right, Bungie might remember, but Ian Alvarez remember them. Don't forget the rest of the room, Ian. Forget the rest. Me and you talking alone here. Ian, remember the days when you went to the fridge with your hot bake in your hand to get blue band butter, but the blue band butter done. And you went for the yellow, the golden ray. Shaking it. No, listen, you don't know what it is when you bite a bake with golden ray, my dear. Oh, once that bake hot with golden ray,
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the mega laugh festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. And moments from now, we'll be talking with Mr. Bukareni about what we call the Trinidad 10. We'll tell you again what that was about, 1969, coming up to the present, with a decision by a university in Canada. But before we get to that, let's take a quick look around the region. We want to go to Jamaica, where they're saying that a miniature man won his first race since 2000. And this report is from TVJ in Jamaica.
Now, 2021 2,000 Guineas winner Miniature Man won his first race in over a year when he landed the feature Caymanas Park Announcers Trophy, a restricted overnight allowance contest over 6.5 furlongs at Caymanas Park today. Denise Waters has a racing review.
The former classic campaigner Miniature Man, who has had his issues and raced despairingly, returned to the winner's circle for the first time since June 2021 when he won the Guineas. With an ease in scale at 117 pounds and returning from a 2-month break, the 4-year-old chestnut gelding bided his time well as he tracked leader Super Duper before making a challenge with apprentice Abigail Abel aboard.
And it is Super Duper in front and making the running, being tackled on the outside by Miniature Man. Super Duper hanging on from Miniature Man, coming forward, also coming forward against the rail. That's Unruly Boss. Amy the Butcher is right there too. Sweet Majesty trying to come, but it's Super Duper and Miniature Man. This is where the race line. Miniature Man points on Super Duper, not giving up. Miniature Man hanging on desperate. Miniature Man begins to pull off in the Caymanas Park Announcers Trophy. Miniature Man beats Unruly Boss. Super Duper is third. Then comes Sweet Majesty and Amy the Butcher.
Conditioned by leading trainer Jason DaCosta, Miniature Man won in 1 minute 19 1/5 by 1.5 lengths.
He was working good. I mean, he had his issues, and I've been working with him in the mornings, and he's been responding. So I'm happy. You know, we got the winner there today. But hopefully he keeps on and he continues to improve and get back to where he was.
So the trainer told me to get a clean break, right? Got a clean break and try to sit close to the leader, right? And I was sitting close to the leader, and the half mile, I take time join the leader until I come to the straight, I'm asking him and respond well.
Meanwhile, it was a hotly contested sprint trip between Yellowstone and Luxor in the Brian Rickman Trophy, a restricted stakes contest going 5.5 furlongs.
And it is Yellowstone attacking on the outside. That's Luxor. Yellowstone and Luxor, these two are fighting for it. KP Choice is sneaking up on the inside. A gift from Ben, switching for space. Yellowstone turning back the challenge at the moment of Luxor coming on the rail. That's KP Choice. Lacrimai is also coming on. It's Lacrimai. It's Yellowstone in front, not getting rid of Luxor coming forward. Yellowstone, it's a good finish in the Brian Rickman OD Trophy. Yellowstone and Luxor going by together. Then comes Lacrimai. KP Choice.
One of two winners for trainer Alfred Brown and ridden by Tevin Foster, Yellowstone just got there by a nose in 1 minute 6 4/5.
Came out of his last race with an injury, so his preparation was light. I didn't push him that much, but the last work was very impressive. So I told myself, let's give ourselves a chance here and see what's happening.
Leading jockey Dane Dawkins rode a double to take his tally to 83 wins for the season. Racing continues on Saturday.
Welcome back to the program. Well, with us now is a man named Booker Rennie. He used to be called Andrew, and I support that because I identify with that because that's also my name. Booker Rennie. He was one of what we call the Trinidad 10, among 10 students from Trinidad and Tobago who were involved in a disturbance at the university called Sir George Williams University at the time in Montreal, Canada. And because of what transpired there, they were expelled, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago had to help pay the passages for them to come back to Trinidad. Well, it led to a situation in which soon after that, the governor of Canada, Sir Roland Michener, was coming to Trinidad, and he was scheduled to have a visit at the St. Augustine campus of the university. He was blocked from entering there, and that led to a series of demonstrations across the country. It is said that those incidents then led to the formation of the National Joint Action Committee. That was 1969. This apology just came weeks ago. We're talking about that now with Mr. Rennie. Good to see you.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Andy.
All right, so take us back to that time. It was 1969. Was it, or 1968 when that happened?
1969.
Right.
February 1969.
Right.
I entered Sir George that year in 67 actually, and I remember when I first ended up there, one of the first things I was told is do not take any courses with one professor, Perry Anderson, because of his problems with black students. I remember that. And but I wasn't into the science, because that course that Perry Anderson taught was a prerequisite for medical school. So a lot of the guys who were into science and had dreams of being medical personnel wanted to be able to pass that course, as it was a prerequisite to move further. I was in the history field, history and political science. And as a matter of fact, as a result of the courses that I did in European history at St. Mary's College, Form 6, I started off with a number of credits assigned to me as a result of the work I did at St. Mary's. So I was ahead of my game. My idea was, at the time, was to try to get my PhD in history by 26, But I remember when I told them that, well, I was not in science, I was into history, but my immediate reaction to them was, what you doing? What you doing? If there's a problem with this particular professor, the idea is, what are you doing about it? And I think what happened, a group of people landed at Sir George in 1967, a younger group of guys. Now, the people who had the problems were about 6 guys had problems with the
professor.
With the professor, right? Fellas like Rodney John, I remember Kennedy Frederick, Douglas Mossop from Jamaica, Kennedy Frederick from Grenada, Rodney John from St. Vincent, Ronald Ambrose also from Grenada, Terence Ballantyne from Trinidad, and Errol Thomas also from Trinidad. There were 6 guys who brought this case against Anderson. What they were asking is to have a hearing committee set up, because the administration at the time was of the view that these guys had no evidence of any racial discrimination by Anderson. But these guys were very firm in what they were saying, and they in fact had take time to collect the information that they wished to take before the hearing committee. What they were asking for simply was that this hearing committee must be agreeable to all the parties involved: Perry Anderson, the students, as well as the university administration. And that was the overall approach to it. But the university, although having that agreement with the students at first, eventually decided to go on their own and arbitrarily set up a hearing committee. And at that point, the students, pushed by a lot of the new guys who had landed on campus, people like Teddy Belgrave, Valerie Belgrave, well, she was Valerie Charles at the time before she married him, Chetty Jagan's son, Joey Jagan, yes, myself, a number of other young people who had come up in '67 and in fact had begun to participate in a lot of what was already happening in Montreal, because you had guys in Montreal like Alfie Roberts and these guys who were already linked with CLR James and had been organizing a number of teachings throughout the summer. And I remember attending some of those meetings that was organized by Alfie Roberts. And 1968 April, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I remember Montreal had, outside of the States, Montreal had the largest funeral demonstration outside of America.
Yeah, and 68 was in fact a pivotal year for demonstrations and activism
demonstration.
Across the region.
Then you had the Black Writers Congress that was organized in October. That was the beauty of a Trinidadian, Raymond Watts, who had come in a couple of years before from London with this idea to have this Black Writers Congress. And Black Writers Congress was a very effective mode of organization. There are a lot of Trinidadians involved: Wally Lookley, Lloyd Best, Walter Rodney came up, Stokely Carmichael, and they was there. Much of Montreal was seeding at the time.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Rodney, because when you said that your ambition was to get a PhD by 26, if my history, if my checks serve me right, I think he had gotten his PhD at 24, right?
At 24,
yeah. And that was the moment.
Well, Walter was kind of my hero, and I was looking to try to follow in his tracks. We met at Black Writers Congress, and when he went back home, he was thrown out of Jamaica.
Yeah.
When he returned from Black Writers Congress, and he came back to us in Montreal, and we organized a number of meetings and teachings for him and whatnot, whilst he organized himself to move on to Tanzania.
Right.
I mean, I remember on one occasion, we went to the Jamaican embassy in Ottawa with Rodney and sought to get the Jamaican ambassador to explain to us why Rodney was being kicked out of Jamaica.
Right.
And I remember he got up and he read out a statement from the Jamaican government. And then after hearing that statement, we asked Rodney to reply. And Rodney jumped up on a chair and replied to him. And I could never forget that. But, sadly, we did not have any, in those days, you didn't have cell phones and all that kind of thing. But that speech that Rodney gave in rebuttal to Jamaica is one of the most fantastic speeches that I have ever heard.
All right.
So at the time, nothing was recorded.
Right.
So we lost
so I want to come back to the issue. And so that then with the situation at Sir George Williams, you all, for whatever reason, was it barricaded yourselves in a computer room and that escalated?
Once they had set up this arbitrary hearing committee and weren't prepared to go along with what they had mutually agreed to, the students occupied the computer center and demanded that a proper hearing be established. The occupation went on for a number of weeks. Eventually, the lawyers, the administration lawyers sat down with us and worked out what we call a compromise agreement, which the students' representatives signed because we were in agreement with it. And the idea was the lawyers will take it back to the administration and the administration would sign. So at that point, we were of the view, because the lawyers had more or less indicated that the likely possibility is the administration would sign this compromise agreement. And so the 400 people were involved in that city. A lot of people went home. In fact, there would have been many, many more Trinidadians involved in that whole thing if people didn't leave and go home with the understanding that the thing had come to an end and the agreement would be signed by the administration, but the administration did not sign the agreement. We who stayed back and eventually got it arrested, but we sat back there to clean up, to hand back the computer center to the administration. And we are the ones who ended up arrested and beaten and jailed and whatnot and whatnot.
All right, I wanted to hold the point. I would come back to then the visit shortly after that by Sir Roland Michener and the prevention of students on the St. Augustine campus from allowing him to enter, and that led into other things, as they say, eventually to the formation of the NJAC. But here's a video we have of the apology being made a couple of days ago, which is the basis for this discussion.
For Rodney John, the events on this campus more than 50 years ago have had a lasting impact, despite 5 university degrees.
I feel unfulfilled. I did not do at university what I wanted to do. My life was directed by the arbitrary judgment of a white man.
John was one of 6 black students who accused their professor at Sir George Williams University of racism in 1968. The university's inaction led a large group of students to occupy the school's computer center. After 13 days, the university called in riot police amid failed negotiations, prompting a violent confrontation and 97 arrests.
Students were forced to lay down on broken glass on the floor and were beaten with clubs. The stain of a criminal record was tattooed on their lives.
After decades of silence, the university, now called Concordia, is apologizing.
We recognize the deep and often dire consequences that the actions of the university had at the time.
It's not something that I expected to ever happen. It's very powerful and very meaningful for me.
The apology is one of 88 recommendations in a new report from the school's anti-black racism task force.
For the university not to address it was a way of contributing to the erasure of those experiences.
All right, so fast forward to now. So what do you make of the apology after all these decades, Bukareni?
Well, after 53 years, 1969, I mean, 53 years, you know, people's lives take a different turn, you know. I, for one, had more or less refused to go back to any university. In fact, whilst I was in the computer center, I made it my business to attend all my history classes. I didn't attend the other classes, but I attended history because of my concern and wanted to do a PhD in history. But I remember I had a small confrontation with the professor over the question of the First World War. We had to do term papers on the First World War, and he didn't like my thesis statement, you know, because I was talking more not about the Archduke that was assassinated in Sarajevo, and of the Slavic people wanted to pull away from Austria-Hungary and join Serbia. But my thing was more about the more, underlying causes, which was the sharp nationalism that was developing among the states in Europe and how they were prepared to contend with each other, especially also given the fact that at that time they were developing colonies abroad and getting new resources, minerals as well as tobacco and sugar and whatnot that would help develop the economic strength between especially Germany, France, and Britain. And he told me that when he was brought back the papers, I went there just to hear his remark, and he told me, you could never prove this position to me. So I went up and I took my paper from him, and I never went back after that.
But I mean, I would tell you that you went on to do history and so on, because one of your
yes,
books...
but what I had planned to do in my PhD, I ended up doing it as a new beginning book, the history of the working class, 1990 to 1956, the Trinidad and Tobago experience.
And it was on the reading list.
That basically would have been the basis of the thesis that I had planned.
Right, and a decade later,
but I did that as a new beginning book.
Precisely.
And just shared it around.
Yeah, I'm saying, and in a decade later, in 1976, 77, 78, it was on the reading list for one of my courses at York University.
Yes. But that was the situation. And then the point of that is that you shift your life away from developing academia, and you move on into being an outright social activist, which is what happened. But Andy, there's something I want to say.
Go ahead.
There was a guy from Arima who went to St. Mary's with me, and I think his case was a case that people seem to forget in the whole build-up of the thing. But I cannot forget it because I knew him well. He came into St. Mary's, a guy called Ephraim Johnson. We worked in customs. He was at the long room. I was in check staff, and we both went enter Sir George at the same time. He had some problems with what he was doing. I think he was doing economics, and he had some serious problems. And he talked about it, but he was never much involved with what was happening with the West Indian Society on campus. And after a couple of months, we realized we wasn't seeing him on campus, so we decided to go home by him to see what was happening. And when we went home, when we went to his home, we met the owner of the building, cleaning up the building, and he told us, he said, well, all your friends went crazy and mashed up the whole place. When we tried to get on to him, he was at Douglas Mental Hospital, and when we went there, he had already been sent back to Trinidad. Ephraim Johnson was a guy who was faced with discrimination at Sir George. He never was able to get his deserts. He came back to Trinidad. I think he ended up working he had left customs, but so when he came back, he went into immigration. By the time we came back to Trinidad and settled back down, we had passed on. But he is one of the guys I think we must not forget. Ephraim Johnson of Arima, a St. Mary's boy, who was an A-spec student. From the time he entered St. Mary's, he never came out of the A-special line. Bright boy, brilliant boy, who had problems with not Perry Anderson, another professor at Sir George.
So it was just not one single professor.
Yes,
there was an issue.
He has been forgotten.
Yeah,
he has been forgotten. I said to myself, I need to bring Ephraim Johnson's name back into the play and let people understand. And Andy, you as an Arima who live in Arima, you could ask around. I think he had a nickname, Awi.
I'll try and find out.
Try and see if you could get onto his family and at least make mention of him in the whole situation.
And see whether we might be related or what have you. You don't know. But
probably it might be related to you. Yes.
Yeah. So there was something systemic about the attitude of the white professors at Sir George Williams at the time. Then.
Yes. you know, I had problems. At one time, I remember I was in an English class. And I remember it was English literature, and I did a paper on James Joyce.
Yeah.
And the lecturer didn't know me because, you know, and when he came back, he came back talking highly about this paper by James Joyce, by this student. And then when he was finished giving all the accolades, he said, who is Andrew Rennie? And I stood up. Well, let me tell you something, Andy. After that, everything I do, I got C. Never got an A+ as I got at the first time when he didn't know who Andrew Rennie was.
Wow.
But all of that was typical at the time, you know. And we lived with that, we worked with that, you know, to move on. Yeah.
All right, well, it just comes that the time is up, but we have to continue the discussion in some form as to what happened after that. So you all came back to Trinidad, and I remember, you know, I was in high school at the time, and when it happened, people were...
I could call all the names. I could call all the names for you. 11 Trinidadians: Jose Amaruso, Hugo Ford, myself, Kenneth Williams, Teddy Belgrave, Valerie Belgrave. She was Valerie Charles. She married
father was Dr. Horace Charles from Siparia.
Dr. Charles from Siparia, yes. Edmund Michael, who's now Dr. Michael in South. Kelvin Robinson, who was passed on. Glenda Edwards, Tobagonian girl, she's a lawyer now. Robert Ramjit Singh of Tunapuna. Well, he wasn't a student at the time, but he joined the occupation.
The resistance.
And whatnot. So there were 11 Trinidadians. But you will see it constantly. They talk about 10 Trinidadians. Yeah. The reason why they started the case with 10 Trinidadians was because I had come to Trinidad and I was not supposed to leave the jurisdiction, but we had a problem in the sense that we were trying to figure out whether we should put the Trinidadians on first as a group, and the lawyers wanted to have a view of what was happening in Trinidad and whatnot. And I left Montreal, came home, and started moving around, met a number of people, and I, in fact, telegrammed the lawyers at them and tell them, look, start with the Trinidadians because Trinidad is ripe for the kind of thing.
At the time.
In fact, whilst I was on that first trip, Trinidad in Christmas of '69, I was the one who organized the Bandage show. Because when the NJAC people asked me what they should be doing, I said, well, I came off in Antigua and took up a paper and I see the
JC's Carnival
show. Yeah. And I said, I think all they should do a smear campaign. And I sat down there. The night I was back in Trinidad, after all, I sat down and wrote out all those posters that you see went up.
Right. And then
the night those posters went up, I had left to go back to Montreal the Sunday morning because the lawyers said, get back here as quickly as possible. But when I went back and they took me to the court, the other 10 Trinidadians that already, the lawyers felt, the judge felt, who was this 11th one? And where was he? He was not supposed to leave this jurisdiction.
We're gonna have to do another chapter.
He said, let him go back. I would not go. I would not let him go with the rest of the Trinidadians. Let him go with the rest of the students. So I was not there with Teddy and them.
Right, and then
I was the 11th missing man.
So the other part of that is that Sir Roland Mitchener then came to Trinidad months after, and he was prevented from entering the campus at St. Augustine, and that led to
But that is because we had already indicated to NJAC that 26th of February would be the day when we will be calling on people all over the world to stand in solidarity with the students. So that march that NJAC had on the 26th that went to the bank and ended up in the church and whatnot, all that was a result of our call to people internationally to come out in support. And NJAC did in fact support fully.
All right, well, we're gonna have to leave it there, my friend. Thank you very much. We will continue in some other form. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We will take a break. We have news at the top. Thank you very much. We have news at the top of the hour. We will continue after that. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
Scrub City, your #1 choice for medical uniforms, medical accessories, and footwear. Scrub City, 2 locations, San Fernando and Chaguanas, or check our Facebook page.
Your WESN News on the Hour. I am Marquis Akers. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Government spends $80 million for installation of CCTV cameras. Pieman robbed and shot in Arima. Tutor speaks on St. George's College infrastructure. Archbishop condemns crime in the country. And internationally, Russia agrees to rejoin Ukraine grain export deal. Now for the details. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the opposition leader's suggestion that there should be 2 ministries of national security to fight crime makes no sense.
I can tell you that will do absolutely nothing to change the behavior and the intention of our homegrown criminal element that has put us today in a position where with the best effort of our police service, we have 500 murders in Trinidad and Tobago.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister informed that government has spent $80 million to install 2,500 CCTV cameras across the country to give the TNT Police Service an extra boost in its fight against the criminal element.
The government has just spent $80 million to provide 2,500 cameras at various locations across this country, and they are being installed as I speak to you now. And the intention is to buy another 2,500. That means there'll be 5,000 public cameras and public spaces and select places in this country which are operated and owned by the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
A 30-year-old pie vendor was shot and injured while making a delivery in Omera this morning. Reports say around 6:15 a.m. in the vicinity of the old gas station, the pie man was accosted and robbed and shot by an assailant. He was rushed to the hospital where he remains warded. Tutor President Martin Lumpkin says the association is concerned with the relocation of the St. George's College to UTT Valsayn. He was speaking on WESN's AM Prime on the issue. Physical classes at St. George's were suspended earlier this month after the school ceiling collapsed as a result of heavy rain.
I understand that there are still issues in the compound of the Valsayn Teachers College. If you can recall, at one point after the college was closed, that's the UTT campus, there was no upkeep of the compound. And we understand there are still some issues of toilets and other infrastructural issues that are continuing at this time, but I know that the ministry is addressing these issues.
Archbishop Jason Gordon is condemning the prevalence of gun-related crimes taking place within the country. This comes following a shooting incident in a close proximity of a school, allegedly in Port of Spain. In a now viral video, a teacher attempted to keep herself and her students safe as gunshots were heard. The incident occurred on Monday.
Top 7 of the nations of the world, which is crazy. And just yesterday, the children of Rose Hill had to duck under their benches and their tables as gunfire was happening for a minute and a half outside, traumatizing an entire school. We are here where we are,
with these global currents pushing against us in such ferocious ways, because we have overplayed one dimension of the human, the mind, the rational dimension of the human.
In international news, Russia has said it will rejoin a UN-backed agreement to allow the export of grain from Ukraine via a safe Black Sea corridor, with shipments expected to resume on Wednesday. Russia's defense ministry confirmed that Moscow would again participate, saying it had received sufficient guarantees from Kyiv that it would not use the maritime corridor for military operations against Russia. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Marquise Akers. Thanks for watching.
Remember, Jerome?
What?
It's just the other day I had a bypass surgery.
That I mean you had to bypass me?
You don't know the position I in?
Position? When that was? You know how long me see you in a position?
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce. The Mega Laugh Festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Son, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. Well, let's just tell you this. You know that the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, which is next door to us across the waters, continues to garner significant international attention because of what is happening there with their mineral resources. The Cooperative Republic began oil production in December 2019 from something called the Liza Phase 1 project in the Stabroek block, offshore Guyana. About 11 billion barrels of oil and gas have been found there. And last week, we were told that about 2 more discoveries. Joining us to talk about that on this edition of AM Prime is Dr. Ashley Singh. He's a senior minister responsible for industry and other finance matters and finance with the Office of the President. Dr. Singh, good to see you.
Good morning, Andy. Good to see you too, and it's great to be on your program. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. And so let's start to talk about the buzz that continues to happen in the country based on the fact that you'll have put a plan to accelerate oil and gas production, and talk about what does that mean, acceleration of production in Guyana, given the rate at which things are happening as we speak.
Sure. So you quite rightly pointed out in your introduction that Guyana started oil production in December 2019, and we've been ramping up production since then. With the launch of the first offshore vessel, the first FPSO, we had production capacity of 120,000 barrels a day. The second FPSO, which was deployed just about early 2022, has capacity of 220,000 barrels a day. So we now have production capacity in the vicinity of 350,000 barrels a day. We're going to be deploying a third FPSO late 2022, probably more likely early 2023, which will have another 220,000 barrel capacity, that's going to take us to about 560,000 barrels a day production capacity. And we're going to continue rolling out additional FPSOs, and we see ourselves within the decade, getting up to producing 1 million barrels a day and more. And that's based on our current proven reserves of 11 billion barrels, But of course, that's only in one block, and exploration continues in that block. And of course, there are other blocks that are either under exploration or shortly to be put under exploration. We've made it completely clear that we recognize that we're living in a world where fossil fuels have finite life.
A lifespan.
Not only, they have a finite lifespan, not only in terms of the reserves that we have, but also because of what's happening globally on the climate agenda. And so a very explicit policy position is that we would like to extract as much as we possibly can in the shortest possible time and deploy the returns from the industry in a manner that would lay the foundation for long-term sustainable growth in Guyana and for improvement in the lives of all of the Guyanese people. And that's very openly and transparently our strategy.
Right, and so I wanted to ask you whether or not you think it's too early for the noises to be made, as my understanding is that they're being made from the opposition in the country and in the parliament about just that, of making these resources, putting these resources at the disposal of the majority of the people. My understanding is that there's some discussion about that. There's some pushback on you all about not moving quickly enough to do that.
Well, regrettably, we have the unfortunate circumstance in Guyana of having an opposition that is very incoherent. To use perhaps the politest word that I can find, and so statement after statement, pronouncement after pronouncement. They articulate positions that don't reflect any degree of coherence. In one breath, they say that we shouldn't be providing cash transfers in times of crisis. In another breath, they say that we should be providing cash transfers in times of crisis. For example, we provided cash transfers during COVID period, cash transfers to households during COVID period, just to give you one example. And so, you hear all manner of random noises from the opposition from time to time in their effort to be critical. Regrettably, the statements that come out of the opposition don't constitute either a coherent policy position that one can seriously engage with and debate with, or indeed a credible and technically sound position on which you can have a serious engagement. Let me say that first and foremost, we place this government, this People's Progressive Party government, places the highest importance on Guyana's credentials as a democratic nation. And so, I'm not going to repeat what transpired during the 2020 elections, but we believe strongly in democracy and democratic elections. We believe strongly in a functioning parliamentary democracy and in engaging the opposition in Parliament and indeed out of Parliament at appropriate fora outside of Parliament, and we're going to continue to do that. But we can only, do so to the extent that the opposition offers, sensible and coherent policy positions that we can respond to.
Right.
Sometimes
I'm glad you mentioned the 2020 elections, because I was on the ground for more than a week covering it, and one of the pieces that I looked at, one of the pieces that I wrote was comparing the manifestos of both sides, and both sides were promising things on the basis that what is happening now was going to happen. So one of my questions is, to what extent your side promised the people of Guyana is happening in the way that you pointed out in the manifesto?
Absolutely. In fact, we're a firm believer. This party, the party with which I'm associated, we're a firm believer in delivering on our promises. And so, in the first instance, when we prepare our manifesto coming out of a consultative process. So when we prepared the manifesto in the run-up to the 2020 elections, we had widespread consultation. So the manifesto reflects feedback that we got from the people of Guyana and what they consider to be important. And it reflects commitments that we believe that we can deliver realistically and that we are committed to delivering. And from the very day that we got into office, we've set about delivering on these commitments. And we track the delivery of these commitments. And I'm very happy to say that we are not only are we well on course to delivering the manifesto commitments that we gave in the run-up to the 2020 elections, but in fact we're actually ahead of schedule. And this is something that we're proud of. And, you know, if you contrast this with, say, the manifesto that the APNU AFC took to the people of Guyana in 2015, the overwhelming majority of which remained completely undelivered and unfulfilled after their 5 years in government, 2 of which were illegal. And so our manifesto, we consider to be a binding social contract with the people of Guyana, and we are committed to delivering on the manifesto, and we're doing so, whether it's in relation to the housing program. We've already rolled out an aggressive housing program. We've said we're going to distribute 50,000 house lots to Guyanese people. We're already ahead of schedule with that. We've distributed well over 10,000 already. These are 10,000 Guyanese families who are going to own their own home for the first time. We've said we're going to create 50,000 jobs. We're well on course to that. We've already created thousands of jobs in a number of sectors. And the same can be replicated across every single sector. We've spoken about modernizing the health sector and building out new and modern health infrastructure. We're in the process of building out, more than 7 or 8 brand new hospitals across the country. We've said we're going to, improve access and quality of education. We're building out new schools, and the list goes on, literally in every single sector. And so the manifesto is our binding commitment, and we are delivering. We're ahead of schedule in terms of delivering on our manifesto commitments, and we will continue to push aggressively to ensure that we deliver every single thing we've promised in the manifesto by the time we go back to the electorate in 2025.
Right. I want to tell you, I used to live in Toronto in a period when Toronto was referred to as Region 13 for the massive out-migration of Guyanese people there. But what I came to discover was that there are so many ways in which we in Trinidad and Tobago and in Guyana, we are similar in many respects, our attitudes to life, our way of looking at life and so on. And then on the ethnic question, and that is a big issue with the politics in our countries. And to what extent your administration now is trying to avoid the kinds of quarrels you get about unequal distribution of the resources and the returns of the resources to the people, as is part of the politics in Trinidad? How are you trying to avoid that?
This is an important issue, and it's not by accident that our president has adopted as a special theme for his presidency the theme, concept, and philosophy of one Guyana. You would know that President Ali has associated the label and the philosophy, and I deliberately say both label and philosophy because it's not just a slogan, it's not just 2 words, it's a deeply rooted philosophy. President Ali has associated the philosophy of one Guyana with his presidency and has made the concept and philosophy of one Guyana inextricably linked to his presidency. And that's not by accident. We recognize that Guyana, like Trinidad and Tobago, is a beautifully and richly diverse country, diverse ethnically, diverse from a religious and spiritual standpoint, diverse culturally, and of course diverse geographically. We have people living on the coast in urban areas, people living on the coast in rural areas, people living in the hinterland. And we're committed as a government, President Ali and his entire government, we are committed to ensuring that all of Guyana participates in and benefits from this incredibly exciting period of transformation in Guyana. Now, that doesn't only mean working in the oil and gas sector, or it doesn't only mean earning from the oil and gas sector. It means many, many more things. In the first instance, we want to make sure that every single Guyanese person is able to participate in the economic transformation. And so that means ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to upskill themselves, acquire a good education, acquire the skills that are needed to be able to participate in the new economy, whether oil and gas, or indeed all of the other aspects of the economy that we're pushing aggressively to modernize. In addition, we are committed to ensuring not just occupational and entrepreneurial opportunity for all Guyanese, but we're also very seriously looking at this from a spatial and geographical perspective. So a lot of the oil and gas activities understandably surrounded, revolving around, say, Georgetown and the mouth of the Demerara River, simply because that's where the capital city is and that's where the main port is. We want to make sure that economic development is seen and experienced and benefited from across all 10 of the regions of Guyana. And so we're pushing very aggressively to make sure that jobs are also created outside of Georgetown, outside of Demerara on the east and west sides of the Demerara River. We're pushing aggressively for jobs to be created in places like Essequibo, in Berbice, and in Linden, so that and indeed even in our hinterland regions, in order to ensure that every single Guyanese family and every single Guyanese person has an opportunity to participate. And so you'll see, particularly on the non-oil side, recognizing that right now, like I said, a lot of the oil activities is happening around the mouth of the Demerara River. You'll see a lot of emphasis on job creation in other regions. So, for example, we're promoting very aggressively the business process outsourcing sector. These are called centers, back office processing centers, and so on. We're encouraging private sector partners to establish these. One has already been established in Linden, for those of your viewers who are familiar with Guyana. One was just established in Essequibo. We're working to bring a couple of call centers to Berbice, creating new kinds of jobs, technology-based jobs, etc. But we're also investing in things like infrastructure to create new economic opportunities across the length and breadth of the country. So, for example, farm-to-market roads to open up new acreage for new agricultural cultivation in areas that are traditionally agriculture-based. So there are new roads being built out in Essequibo, in Berbice, and elsewhere, all with the objective of opening up.
There's a place, the name of which I just love to call it, the Rupununi. What's happening in places like
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the Rupununi. The Rupununi is, of course, the region that's contiguous to northern Brazil. This is the southwestern Guyana. And on the Brazilian border, Rupununi includes, of course, Letem, which is the popular location on the border with Brazil. And that's an area that the Rupununi Region 9, as we call it, is an area that we place tremendous emphasis and importance on, just like we do all other 9 regions of Guyana. And so only recently our president was in Region 9. He outlined a new and aggressive housing program for the people of Region 9, unveiled a new housing area. We recently completed and we're outfitting a new industrial estate in Letem with a view to industrial activities being created in Letem. Just to give you a sense of, we're promoting large-scale agriculture in Region 9 and through Region 9, because of course Region 9, like I said, is adjacent to Brazil. And so even in, literally in every single one of the 10 regions, we've got an agenda for rolling out. If that region has a comparative advantage in agriculture, or it has a comparative advantage in tourism, or it has a comparative advantage in mining, whatever the region might be, we're promoting very aggressively economic activity across whichever sectors the respective region might have a proven comparative advantage.
Yeah, so what you're saying there is that there's every effort to keep faith with again what I saw and what I looked at and tried to look into in the manifesto promises in 2020, and that's excellent. So, but I want to ask you, so you're talking to a Trinidad audience, mainly here now this morning, although we are seen all over the place, and there was this discussion in Trinidad and Tobago about what is referred to as the local content sort of issues with the developments in Guyana, and there was some, I don't want to say misunderstanding, but there was an issue that arose about it to the extent that Trinidad and Tobago interests were seeing that sort of was an attempt to lock them out or lock us out of the relations as they should flow from what is happening in Guyana, business about local content and so on.
Sure. So I'm going to come back to the local content, but I want to go back. You mentioned Rupununi and Region 9, and I should have said that perhaps most importantly, for a long time we've been speaking about an improved road linkage between Brazil and Guyana.
Yes.
And of course, the Rupununi Region 9, Letem is the entry point. We have actually finally started building out the road from Linden to Letem. So phase 1 of the road is currently being built from Linden to Mabura, and we're building 32 concrete bridges across the 32 rivers along that route. And we're looking also at building a new bridge over the Demerara River. So once that road is completed, that's going to completely transform life and economy in Lethem and in Region 9, and it's going to create a permanent road linkage and permanent all-weather road linkage between Brazil and Northern Guyana, and will mobilize and realize all of the remarkable and almost immeasurable economic opportunities that will derive from those. So I just wanted to mention that road because it's so important. To come to the local content question, you quite rightly identified that we took to Parliament at the end of last year a new Local Content Act. That act carves out 40 sectoral priorities against which 40 areas, 40 categories of goods and services against which we have specified minimum local content requirements, meaning that we've specified a percentage associated with each one of those categories of goods and services that the respective oil and gas companies and their tier 1 contractors now have a legal obligation to adhere to that minimum local content percentage, which means that they have to buy goods and services under that specific category in compliance with that minimum percentage being sourced from Guyanese companies and Guyanese nationals. Let me say clearly that local content legislation and local content policies are by no means a novelty, and they are by no means unique to Guyana. Trinidad and Tobago has a much publicized and widely known local content policy. That local content policy is publicly available and has been very widely known for a long time, and perfectly understandably so, because small countries like ours, like Trinidad and Tobago, when in the early stages of your oil and gas industry, like Guyana at our current stage, it's very important that we put in place a framework that ensures some minimum measure at a minimum. Obviously, you want to maximize, but secures and assures a minimum level of participation by nationals of your country, corporate and citizens, corporate companies, and citizens of your country. And there's nothing unusual about that. Like I said, Trinidad had a local content policy. Guyana has a local content. When we've in fact, articulated it in a very clear and transparent way, and we've gone to Parliament and we've legislated it. Now, let me say very clearly that instead of being characterized as a means through which non-Guyanese nationals are being shut out, the local content policy actually does exactly the opposite. Because what the local content policy does is it creates a framework that explicitly incentivizes partnerships with Guyanese nationals and partnerships with Guyanese companies. And so, since the local content framework has been legislated in the Local Content Act, you now have a legal framework that explicitly and transparently incentivizes international and regional companies coming to Guyana to enter partnerships and enter joint ventures to be able to participate in the oil and gas industry in an environment where Guyanese companies and Guyanese nationals are also involved. And it does so in an open and transparent way. The oil companies are required to submit their procurement plans. We have set up a local content secretariat that approves those plans. There are transparent mechanisms for procuring goods and services. There are transparent definitions about what constitutes a Guyanese company or a Guyanese national. And that framework explicitly allows and accommodates joint ventures and partnerships.
All right, Dr. Singh.
We want to incentivize and encourage that, and we encourage companies from around the world and from around the region, including Trinidad and Tobago, to come and do business in Guyana. Guyana is open for business to the entire world.
All right, Dr. Singh, we're going to have to adjourn simply because our time is out. We've gone past our welcome here on the program. But thank you very much. We will have to continue.
I'd be happy to come back anytime you wish, Andy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashley Singh. He is the senior minister in the office of the President of the Cooperative Republic, responsible mainly for finance and industrial matters like this. Well, that's our broadcast of this edition of the program. We thank you for watching. We tell you can always keep in touch with us here at AM Prime at WESNCC on all your social media platforms. You could send your emails there. That brings the curtain down. Half an hour from now, there's news at the top of the hour, followed by today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small. But for now, I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
WESN.
Secret Girls RC School presents